The U.S. Census counted over 7 million Americans claiming native roots, and the genealogists who chase those claims for a living say almost none of them can prove it. Harvard's Henry Louis Gates hears it on camera constantly, and the DNA keeps saying no. The proudest bloodlines in America, one tube of spit at a time. There are stories sitting in millions of American families right now, and a $99 DNA kit is quietly erasing them, and that is not my claim. It is what the people who run these tests for a living keep reporting. Every family has its version. The proud ancestor, the heritage that meant you came from something, the line nobody ever questioned. And as the genealogists who handle these cases put it, nobody checks the story that makes them proud until the test checks it for them. By 2020, more than 30 million people had taken a direct-to-consumer DNA test, according to the testing industry's own figures. And one by one, the proudest lines in the country started failing. By the end of this, you will see exactly how the bloodlines Americans were proudest of are coming apart, and why the prouder the story, the faster the test erases it. It starts with the one almost every American family seems to carry. It is the single most claimed and most disproven ancestor in America, and the genealogists who do this professionally see it more than any other, the Cherokee princess. You already know how the picture because every version is the one the researchers describe. A great-great-grandmother, long dark hair, high cheekbones, royal native blood. And case after case, those same genealogists report the identical ending. The test comes back, and the native ancestry the family swore by is simply not there. Here is the detail that ends the legend before the DNA even runs, and it comes from documented history. Not from me. There were no Cherokee princesses. Historians are clear the Cherokee had no kings, no queens, no inherited royal titles. Villages were led by chosen chiefs, not crowned royals. The princess was a European idea pasted onto a native woman by outsiders, which means the story was already a myth the day it was first told. And the confirmation most people do not expect is the one that ends the argument. The Cherokee Nation itself, through its Secretary of State, has stated officially that using a DNA test to claim a connection to the tribe is, in their words, inappropriate and wrong. The tribe at the center of the myth, the Harvard scholar who studies it, and the results landing in millions of inboxes all point the same way. When all three agree, the story is over. But the next one does not collapse at the bottom of the family tree, it collapses at the top, and the professional genealogists are just as blunt about it. The royal ancestor, the king, the queen, the noble European line, the surname that supposedly ties you to a castle. For these claims, the researchers say plainly, a home DNA kit will not save you, and the paper trail ends the dream fast. The documented noble lines of Europe are written down in references like Burke's Peerage, and the genealogist's rule is simple. If your supposed ancestor is not in those credible records, the connection is, in their experience, wishful thinking. Same surname as nobility is not descent from nobility, they warn. Dig into the records, and as they put it, the king becomes a farmer who happened to share a famous last name. You can check that logic yourself the moment you trace one generation past the legend. The one after that might be the most American myth of all, and the genealogists say nearly every old family has it: Mayflower descent. It seems like any family with a long history in this country has a Mayflower ancestor, and the researchers say most of those stories are exactly that, the family myth. And this one does not just trip up ordinary families. Take the most famous example the genealogists cite. Winston Churchill's own family long asserted descent from a Mayflower passenger named Richard Warren, and modern genealogists discredited that claim outright. Think about what that tells you. If a family with Churchill's resources and documented pedigree carried a Mayflower story that did not survive the record, the researcher's point lands hard. The dinner table version in an ordinary family rarely does either. The proof is in how the societies that verify these lines work. The Mayflower descendants organizations demand a sourced, documented pedigree, not a feeling, precisely because the feeling is so often wrong. And then the test does something strange. It rewrites your whole sense of where you come from. The testing industry reports that roughly 1 in 5 Americans has now spit in a tube, and a large share of them open the results to find an ethnicity they never expected. The family that always called itself one thing, discovering its origins trace somewhere else entirely. The companies describe this as one of the core things the tests do. They let people, in the industry's own framing, discover their authentic ancestry, which is a polite way of saying the version Grandma gave you was wrong, and you do not have to take my word for the emotional size of that. Reporting on the testing companies found the surprise calls so frequent that a firm like 23andMe built training for its customer service staff specifically to handle them, because the people calling were not asking technical questions. They were in shock. Which leaves the genealogists and psychologists who study this agree breaks families. The hidden father, the same kit that erases a proud ancestor, sometimes reveals the man who raised you is not the man you came from. And researchers studying direct-to-consumer testing estimate that up to 5% of people who take these tests uncover an unexpected biological parent. And before you reach for the scary numbers you have heard, here is the honest correction, because it matters. The famous 30% figure is, in the words of geneticists Turi King and Mark Jobling at the University of Leicester, an urban myth. The real rate sits closer to 2%, with the broader scientific reviews landing around a median of under 4%. That is the fair version. But even at that rate, across 30 million testers, the math is staggering, and the studies describe what those people go through in the same language every time. Profound grief, a destabilized identity, shame they did not earn. The test does not care which secret it finds. It hands you the proud lie and the painful truth in the same email. And once you have read it, the researchers note, you cannot unread it. You become the one person at the family table who knows the old story is not true, and that is the part you do not get to give back. So here is what every one of these collapsing bloodlines has common, and it is the through line the genealogists name across all of them. Each story made a family feel like more than it was, and each was passed down with total confidence by people who were not lying, people who simply never had a way to check. For 100 years, there was no test, only a gap in the record and a mysterious grandmother, and the mind fills a blank with the most flattering story it can. Mystery becomes mythology. It was never a lie anyone chose to tell. It was a hope passed down until it wore the costume of truth, and DNA is just the first tool precise enough to undress it. If you have heard one of these at your own family's table, and the genealogists say almost everyone has, you now know what most people repeating it do not. And here is the pattern underneath all 5, the thing the title was really about. The bloodlines Americans were proudest of are not random casualties. They are the first to fall. The prouder the story, the less anyone ever checked it. The more the family built its identity on it, and the harder the test hits when it lands. Pride was never protection. Pride was the reason the story was never verified in the first place. That is the line Gates keeps proving on camera, family after family. The claim a family is proudest of is usually the first one a test takes apart. Which leaves the harder question the researchers keep running into and never fully answer. If the stories we were proudest of are the ones least likely to survive the record, what does that say about why we needed them in the first place? And what happens to a country's sense of itself when the comforting version of its bloodlines gets quietly corrected, family by family, inbox by inbox, with nobody ever really deciding to let it go? There is one more origin story even bigger than these, one the testing companies almost never talk about because it touches nearly everyone who has ever taken the test. That is where this goes next.